your Atlantic crossing you did. Why?
Well, I don't know, Yoda. There was a great many things that caused us to fail our Atlantic crossing.
Oh, were you scared?
Yeah, I was a little scared, you know.
Oh, much fear I sense in you. Much fear. Fear is the path to the dark side.
Yes, Yoda, I know fear is the path to the dark side, and you know, it's just that when you're out there in the ocean, hey man, it's scary, you know. You don't see land, you got big waves. You know, a lot of people would be scared in a similar situation like that.
You know, you need more faith.
Well, okay. I'll try to find some faith and go at it again, but let me tell these good people what really happened. Well, let me see if I can explain what happened out there. First off, you know, we really did do our absolute best to prepare for this trip in every way that it could possibly be done. Uh, the guy that we asked to come along, well, I was just mentioning that our insurance company wanted a third person on board the boat for watches, so would give us more of a break, more sleeping time. Sleeping offshore on this boat is something that's going to have to take some getting used to. You hear that alarm? That's the bilge alarm. We're going to get back to that. That's the bilge alarm for the starboard hull. And anyway, that was part of the reason why we're back. But we'll circle around to that. Anyway, I was talking to this guy, and he said he always wanted to sail to Europe on a sailboat, and he had been offshore on some big military transports sailing across the ocean. But the one thing that we couldn't get through, you know, he went with us, and he was very good mechanic, very talented mechanic, and you know, he was able to see possible areas where the boat would not hold up, and very detail orientated person. But the one thing you couldn't get through to him is that we have been waiting for the month of May to take this trip to Europe for an extremely good reason. This is the recognized weather window for traveling from America to Europe on board a small sailboat. That's it. I mean, that's the bottom line. This is your weather window. It only comes once a year. You know, you could go in June, but you're really pressing your luck because you know, you could get a rogue hurricane, whatever. As it turned out, from our date of departure until making this video today, we have had no weather between here and Europe. It's been a clean slate. No big storms moving up. The predictions of the direction of the weather for this time of year were perfect. They were dead on, dead spot on, and we were not in any danger of some big storm coming out of nowhere and just knocking the crap out of us. It just wasn't going to happen. The storms were staying to the north of the low pressure systems have been staying north of the 40 degrees latitude. So that's just an important point, because one of the reasons that we did turn around was that he was completely convinced that we were going to get some big storm, and the bottom line is that's the reason we were going in May. And so we had the weather covered. And when you go offshore, weather is the most important thing. You can, whether you can tie a knot on a boat, whether you can raise a sail, whether you can sail on the most perfect course to your destination, none of that is even remotely relevant to the weather that you're going to have to contend with. And waiting for the right time of year to go is obviously the best thing to do. So we went out. I think we did suffer a strike on this starboard hull, and there is a slow leak coming from the what I think is the top of the rudder post in the back. I also think because we had to run the motors for so many hours getting in off the ocean, when we turned around and came back, the weather and the wind were totally against us. And so we really beat the shit out of this boat trying to get back in off the ocean, and ran the motors for a lot longer than they should have been. And I think the starboard cutlass bearing was developing a knock in it. There was a little bit of play in it when we put it back in the water, but it was not significant. Now I think it is significant. So in any case, we need to find a place to pull the boat out and fix those two items, but they don't have to be fixed immediately. We could do some sailing and maneuvering. But I think the strike, whatever we hit offshore, I asked him when we hit it, I says, geez, that sounds like we hit something. He thought it was just another wave, but it really had more of a metal, more of a solid surface sound to me, and it was definitely on this starboard hull, and that's where the leak is. So I think that happened early on. The escape hatches on the master bedroom have just the tiniest little dribble, and quite frankly, from the little latch handle there's little O-rings, and those O-rings get dry and hard, and so they need to be replaced once in a while. But it's such a small little dribble, and they seem to have quit dripping. But Gail was quite frankly very terrified of the escape hatches. That's what I was having a hard time explaining was the shape of the hull. The hatches are kind of put into pockets, and the hull forces the water pressure away from the hatch as the boat travels through the water. So those hatches are designed to be there, and they do a great job, and they're fun to look through, and I don't plan on fiberglassing them in, and we're gonna keep them. So let's see, what else did we have here? Oh, the computer, the navigation computer was, the compass was messing up, and one problem is that I guess the big compass on the boat is supposed to be filled with an oil, and there is no oil in it. So even though it reads, as far as I'm concerned, I have no problem reading it, but it does bounce around a lot because the oil that slows down that movement is missing. So that was not a problem as far as I was concerned. But the compass that's attached to the computer, which does the navigation, was reading totally wrong. We really couldn't make any sense out of what was happening. It's located in the kitchen, the electronic down in the kitchen cabinets, and we've always been careful to make sure that there's no metal, pots and pans or anything, within 2 feet of that compass. But what we what we didn't look at was what was on top of the cabinet. On top of the countertop, there were two big metal trays with metal items in them, tools. They were just kind of turning into a junk drawer. So there was all kinds of metal within about really 6 to 8 inches of the compass. And how all that got there and collected there, I don't know, but I didn't discover it until a couple days ago. We've already been back for almost a week, and I finally figured out when I was working on the electronics. I go, wait a minute, what is all this stuff? And then cleared that away, and it seems to have cleared up. The compass error and the autopilot now works. We spent almost 3 days hand steering this boat because there was metal junk on the countertop. So anyway, that's a live and learn situation. The mainsail, we didn't realize until we were almost back, but the mainsail, our brand new $2,800 mainsail, was coming apart. And now I will say most of the damage that the boat has suffered, like the mainsail, that was all due to upwind sailing. If you don't know anything about boating, just take my word for it. If you're going with the wind and with the waves, it's a much smoother ride. And this whole trip was going to be with the wind, with the waves, all the way to Europe. Okay, no headwinds planned. I mean, I might do a broad reach, which means you're going parallel to the wind, but there was no upwind sailing that was planned, and there was no upwind, as I've been checking the weather, there was no upwind sailing that would have been required, at least all the way to the Azores. So it was all downwind or broad reach work, and which gives you a much smoother ride. It's a lot less hammering and beating and banging on the boat than what you would normally experience if you're trying to go upwind. This boat will travel 30 to 60 degrees off the wind, upwind, but it is a slammer and a hammer. And I think I've got some video of that, and some of the upcoming portions that I'm going to be putting online here will show you. You'll get an experience. You'll get to feel the difference between downwind sailing and upwind sailing. We did have one period where the second night out we had 30-35 knot winds, sustained pretty much all afternoon. The boat sails great in 30-35 knot winds. It sails like a bullet. This thing is fast and with absolutely no effort. And but what we didn't realize is that if the wind blows 30-35 knots all day, all afternoon, the waves just keep getting bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger because that sustained wind. Well, we ended up making kind of an emergency decision to go ahead and turn into the wind, lower the sails, and then turn away from the wind with the motors running. And that way you got a nice smooth ride. It's kind of just a nice smooth downhill ride until the wind blows itself out. It's called running with bare poles. That's the term of it, and that's what we did. So when we turned into the wind, there was one wave that really took us straight up. I was on the bow looking down, and it was a little scary. If it would have been a 50, 60, 70 mile an hour wind, the wind might have got under the boat and flipped us over, but with only a 30 knot wind, it probably was in really no danger. It just felt that way. And when you're offshore and you're out on that deck, the wind is just undescribable. Even a 20 or 25 knot wind, when you're out on that deck, there's nothing slowing that wind down. There's nothing in the way of the wind, and a 20 knot wind feels like you're in a 50 knot gale. It's just unbelievable amount of wind, and something that's quite hard to get used to. So very disconcerting. It takes a while to learn what is normal when you're offshore. what is acceptable, what's not acceptable, how the boat handles this situation and that situation. And we were learning a lot. And you know, we turned around after we were 200 miles offshore, but we had actually sailed for, you know, closer to 350 miles in 4 days, because we were not able to sail in a straight line. You have to sail either with the wind or on a broad reach parallel to the wind, which means that you're kind of, you know, zigzagging towards your eventual goal. I just believe on giving my rig and my passengers the smoothest ride possible. So I usually set sail to a comfortable as I can make it, ride and angle, and especially when I know that I've got 30 days to get somewhere. I mean, Gail's got 6 months worth of food on board this boat. We make our own water. We make our own electricity. There was no hurry to do any of this, none whatsoever. And so anyway, we had a lot of concern from Gail and from our first mate about the trip, about the way it was going. They both were not happy. I could have lived with the little leak. The bilge pump came on, you know, maybe 3-4 times a day for a few seconds, pumps it out like you heard right there, and that's the end of that. It's no big deal. But we could have gone across with the situation the way it was, but we turned around and came back, and I feel like next time I will make sure that I have someone, if we do have someone on board the boat, it'll be someone who has actually done the trip maybe a few times on a sailboat, so that they will kind of understand what normal is and what's not normal. And it was just best to turn around, come back, reset. We'll do the trip again next year. We have spent 2 years and $200,000 on this boat, and to say that I'm frustrated, that's
Frustrated. I don't know anybody around here who's frustrated. Yet. I'm not frustrated.
Anyway, we'll get going. This is still part of the big plan, and we're hoping that that it will still come together. So we're going to fix up our owies, and I guess we're going to sail north, try to get into some cool weather, and then probably sometime in August, turn around late August, sometime September maybe, start heading south and try to get someplace comfortable for winter. Maybe the Bahamas, maybe the Caribbean. And then from the Caribbean, we want to join, this time we will join the Atlantic Crossing Rally, probably from the Caribbean, so that we can get in with a group of sailors that are more experienced, know what they're doing, and then we will cross the Atlantic with them. I think now that I've tried to do it and failed, I think now I see the advantage of going with a group who's done it, and with a group of sailors, so that you have more input rather than what's in our own little heads as to what we think should be happening. So with that, I wish you all a good evening, and we will keep the videos coming, and show you some videos real soon on the trip back. So there was 200 miles as the crow flies, closer to 300 or 400 miles the way we went, of us hammering back against the wind in order to get in. and we had to do it without autopilot and some other conveniences. So it was a bit of a rough trip, but we got her done. So with that, have a good night.